Okay, so we have one of the emotional effects, which is some people may not purchase until this whole thing blows over, which is going to negatively affect the prices on these properties because people aren't having bidding wars and drive the prices down. On the other hand, we also have the sellers that may not want people coming in their home during this time, which is going to negatively affect the supply. And if there's too much demand or the same amount of demand and a decrease in the supply, then the prices are either going to stay the same or go higher. So during this time where the stock markets are going down and everything, if that were to happen, you may actually see real estate prices go up, and maybe only in some particular areas, maybe across the board. Nobody knows for sure. The next one that I think a lot of people are familiar with is if people can't continue to run their small businesses or their medium to large size businesses, even if this continues over a long period of time, they're going to have to lay people off. And obviously, if people aren't working, they're not going to be looking to get homes. Or if they're worried about being laid off, they're not going to be looking to purchase a home or sell their home if they do have one, especially if it's paid off anytime soon. Alongside that, because the economy isn't going to continue to grow if we aren't able to figure out something very soon, what's going to happen is hiring rates are going to be slowed because the business owners are going to be a lot more conservative if they're not pulling in more and more money every year. And then on top of that, since kids are not at school, they're going to be at home with mom and dad. So one parent may potentially have to stay home and watch the kid, or they're going to have to work less and trade off, and that's going to negatively affect how much income they're pulling in, especially people like nurses, firefighters, police officers who may be working a lot of overtime, and now they're not able to do that because for a lot of those fields, their income could essentially be doubled by doing the overtime. So if they aren't able to do all that overtime because they have to watch the kids, they're going to have half that taken away. So, everybody's going to be affected differently, but those are going to be two things that are kind of on the negative column. On the positive side of things, the hope is in that case where, everybody has to shelter in place for a really long time and all the businesses are hurt and everybody's hurting across the board and the economy's hurting, the hope is that the general lack of overbuilding that we've had for quite a while now, and the lack of building supplies to continue building new buildings during this time, and lack of construction workers because they may, God forbid, possibly be sick, and so on and so forth, combined with the fact that we're going to have, really low interest rates, the hope is that that will be a big enough buffer to negate a lot of those negative effects. Also on the positive side of things, we have China that equates for about $13.4 billion of the $77.9 billion of residential foreign real estate that's being purchased, which means that China owns 17.2% of the foreign real estate that's being purchased in the US. That's very important to note because the Chinese real estate market is not doing well right now. And nobody's stock markets are doing well right now, which means that all of these countries, in particular China, are pouring their money into safer areas. Since the US hasn't been hit as hard by the coronavirus yet, they're hoping, and everybody obviously in the US is hoping, that we don't get as hard as they got hit, and we hope that our, real estate market doesn't get hit as hard. So they're pouring all of their money over here because it's the, quote unquote safer option. Obviously there's still a very inherent risk with that, but in comparison to a place where it's already tanking, it is considered a lot safer. So that's one positive thing, because we want more money coming over here. We want more, demand. We want the prices to keep going up. That's only going to help the economy. We want all of that. Another thing in the good column as far as the real estate market goes is the fact that we have over about 480% mortgages being taken out this year than there were last year. So we already have a really high demand, so we do have a little bit of a buffer. Now, an indicator of what I was talking about at the beginning of the video is this. A few weeks ago, Realtor.com said that the national inventory of houses for sale fell by 15.3%. That means that 15% of the inventory got taken off the market. It's most likely because the real estate agents told them, hey, you want to have your listing out there on Zillow, Trulia, Redfin, yada yada yada, with 0 days out. And not a lot of people are going to be purchasing right now because of this, so take your inventory off the market. Then the government lowered the interest rates and drove a bunch more buyers in, and now they're starting to raise it because they drove in too many buyers and so many listings were pulled off. So it totaled 184,000 listings that got pulled off the market. And the average listing price was $310,000 across the US. Now, that's good because that means that a lot of listings are being taken off, lower interest, and then more buyers. So the scales are being tipped in the direction that will increase the price of real estate, which is good. That's what the government's trying to do, and they did it well enough that now they're actually, starting to raise the interest rates again. So I hope that you got your refinance locked in a few weeks ago. Two of the real estate sectors that are going to be the hardest hit and are getting hit pretty hard right now are going to be hospitality management, hotels, resorts, stuff like that, because people aren't flying out and staying in other places. They're staying in the place they rent or the place they own. And then the industrial side is also getting hit hard because they don't have enough supplies from China to be able to build things. So there's that. And then the other problem is if their workers continue to get sick, then they're not going to have enough people to build the supplies that they need to, give out to the US population and so on and so forth. But, two areas that are potentially going to be doing better are multifamily and apartments as far as the kind of residential / commercial side goes. Because where do people move when, God forbid, they lose their job or they start making less money? They move into the cheaper, more inexpensive units in apartments or in multifamily. So those are two that may potentially actually go up or at least stay the same. Even during, our worst recession, the average occupancy rate for a lot of these apartments only fell down to about 90, maybe 88%. So they have the economy of scale on their side, and they have the emotional factor that, it's cheaper, so everybody's going to be coming over there. I was curious, so I actually just looked at the rental housing vacancy rates for multifamily and apartments in the past 5 recessions, and the numbers range from about 5.40% down to 10.30%, and that was during 2008, 2009 when we had the subprime lending and the subprime mortgages going out to people. And, obviously things can always get worse, but I think a good number to go off of is the numbers that are either occurring right now or in the past, which is 5 to 10%. So if you have apartments or multifamily, you should be looking at an average vacancy rate of anywhere between 5 to 10. So across the board, I think that the real estate market will be kind of mildly to moderately affected. Now, some specific areas that rely heavily on energy, tourism, and trade may be more affected than the other ones, but nobody really expects a repeat of 2008, 2009 because, we've done a lot to protect against people just being able to get too many mortgages, being able to take on too big of a mortgage. Our lending practices are a lot more strict nowadays. So there's not that same capability to just flood the market with inventory and throw that balance of supply and demand out of whack. So even though the stock market may be going down, that is not always tied to, the real estate market. They can be completely separate. It all depends on the reason that we are going into a recession. And typically that reason will heavily affect that one sort of industry, and then kind of mildly to, maybe not even at all, maybe even positively affect some other areas. Alright, you guys, that's about all I have for you today. I'll see you next time.